Hi everyone. So I wanted to create a video that talks about the ones who walk away from Amelia's and kind of give you some hints and ideas to help you better understand the story. This is kind of basically the same lecture that I'd give in a ground class. And I think, students really take away a lot after you have a discussion about the ones away from walk away from Amelia's. So I'm going to start off this discussion with kind of a random question. And I think this question, though, does relate directly to what the ones who walk away from Amelia's is all about. So I want to know what happens when society takes what is evil and makes it the good. And I know that this might be somewhat kind of confusing if you think about this, but just take a moment to think about where have we seen in society where society has taken what is evil and used that to promote the greater good. Now, the second thing I will also tell you that I think Amelia's is about, I think Amelia's is also directly about rhetoric. So in a ground class, the first thing I would do when I would talk about Amelia's is I would say, where do you imagine if you were making this into a movie or a TV show, where would you set Amelia's? Because there are certain things that we know about Amelia's. We know it's the happiest place on earth. We know it's a place where people can do anything that their heart desires, and it's a place of absolute beauty. So where would you imagine setting Amelia's? And for me, I always imagine Amelia's being this picturesque, just beautiful city. So for some reason I have like this image of Lake Tahoe, because I know in the story there's a lake, there's some mountains. I also might set it in Amsterdam. And the reason why I would set it in Amsterdam, right, is Amsterdam is a very beautiful city, but you also, if you know anything about Amsterdam, you can do anything your heart desires. There's a red light district, you can go to a coffee shop and smoke marijuana. You can do basically anything that your heart desires in Amsterdam. And the last place I might set it is Disneyland, because notice they always do say Disneyland is the happiest place on earth. But if we know that the city of Amelia is a place of happiness, that people can do anything their heart desires, they can walk around naked, they can take drugs, there's a place of just absolute bliss. But notice that the story basically says, and I want to sort of frame this in two ways, because my original memory of the story was that once in your life, you had to go to Spot X, and at Spot X you would see Y. And notice that was one of the quiz questions that I ask, right? Is that you have to, once in your life, you have to go to Spot X, and if you go to Spot X, you see Y. My students tell me that it's optional. You don't have to go to Spot X. You know that Spot X exists. If you want to go, you can go, but you don't have to. But if you go to Spot X, there is Y. And so the question, okay, what is X and Y? So X is basically, I'm thinking, is the town center, the basement, the broom closet. There's several different interpretations of that, but no matter where you go, let's just assume it's a cellar, right? There you go. Why is you see this suffering child. And notice if I were to pick up this suffering child and put it on a table, notice the condition it is. It's covered in its own feces, right? It's crying. It's got open sores on it. It used to moan and cry out, but now it doesn't cry anymore. We don't even know for sure what the sex of the child is. And here it is, this poor, suffering child. And notice they tell us there's absolutely nothing you can do to help this child. If you do anything to help this poor, suffering child, society will crumble. And notice there are many people in Amelia's who just break down and cry when they see the child, right? Some people get so frustrated they kick the child. And at the end of the story, there are some people who just walk away. And I always ask in a ground class, do the people who walk away make a difference? And some students say yes, and some students say no, right? Some students say, hey, those who walk away, at least they're not willing to participate in a society where the greater good is letting a child suffer, right? But no matter what you do, nothing can be done to help and save that suffering child. So the key to understanding Amelia's is to ask ourselves, well, what does that child symbolize? And I've often had students come up with some of the greatest interpretations of what does the child represent. So if you go back and look at the story, there is one interpretation of the child is that the child has suffered for all of us, right? The child has suffered for all of our happiness. And if that's the case, right, then there is some textual evidence to suggest that the child is a Christ-like figure, right, that the child could be Christ. But I oftentimes have students just come up with some great ideas of what the child symbolizes. So I one time was teaching a summer school class, and I had some students who had spent their freshman year down at UC San Diego, and they said that they thought the child represented Mexico. I said, well, how did you figure that the child symbolizes Mexico? And they said, well, if you think about it, here it is, you're 18, 19 years old as a freshman at UC San Diego. You want to party, you want to drink, and right across the border from San Diego is Tijuana, one of the poorest cities in Mexico, if not the world, right, where you can do anything your heart desires. And so a lot of college kids go across to Tijuana, they party. It's a city that has a heavy poverty level, and then after they leave, they can just leave and walk away and come back to San Diego. And if you think about, right, San Diego is one of the wealthiest cities in California, if not the nation. And I think that's a genius interpretation, right? The child could represent poverty. I've also had one time had a student say, I think the child represents Nike. I said, you mean like Nike, the shoe company? And they said, yeah. And if you think about it, Nike makes a really good athletic product, right? Most people like to wear Nikes. But if you think something like the LeBron James shoe, right? LeBron James shoes, people may be willing to spend $300, $400 for a pair of LeBron James Nikes. But where does Nike make its product? Using sweatshop labor, right? Exploiting children, right? So in many cases, Nike, the child could represent Nike. And I think that's just a genius interpretation. Now notice that the child is covered in sort of a little bit of filth, like a layer of like grim, sort of gray, almost coal or ash. So there's some interpretation that the child could symbolize gas or oil. Because if you think about it, in the United States, we get gas and oil fairly cheap. But historically, most of our gas has come from the Middle East, right? From Saudi Arabia. And these are countries that are dictatorships, that treat their citizens poorly. Women are treated as second-class citizens, right? That they have human rights abuses. But we love our cheap gas and oil, that we'd pay anything for that. So and notice, if we found out tomorrow that gas and oil was going to run out in a month, society would crumble, because so much of our society is dependent on gas and oil. So I think it's just ingenious that the child could in fact symbolize either gas or oil. And so when I come back to thinking about, talking about that question, what happens when society takes what is good and takes what is evil and makes it the good, also I think relates directly to the story, because, if you think about historically, when Hitler rose to power, he made the persecutions of the Jews the greater good, so much to the point that they tried to exterminate the Jewish population. If you think about a time in America's history when we took what was evil and made it the good, that at one point slavery was the good of the land, and we had to have a civil war to end that. So I want you to think about, what does the child symbolize for the next discussion board question, because I think that's a very, very important question. And so I'll post up this on our discussion board question, but I want to just have you some background of the ones who walk away from Amelia's. And then I'll see what you guys have to write.